Online worlds don't really die. They stall, they empty out, and they freeze in the exact moment their last active communities stepped away from them. When you log into these spaces years later, some of them are still running, still waiting for someone to walk through them again. And that strange in-between state creates a sensation that's hard to describe, because it feels like rediscovering a place that shouldn't exist. In the early days of the internet, MMOs weren't just games. They were experiments in digital social life. Places where people learned how to present themselves online, how to talk through avatars, how to exist in shared virtual space. Modern online worlds are engineered and polished, but the ones from the late 90s and early 2000s were raw, experimental, and unusually personal. Many of them weren't built around combat or leveling. They were centered on the idea of digital presence. Today, most of these early worlds are empty. They run in the background of the internet, like forgotten islands. Millions of players once passed through them, and now a handful of explorers wander through them out of curiosity, or the desire to see what remains. I spent the past few weeks visiting 3 of the most iconic abandoned social MMOs: There.com, Worlds.com, and Activeworlds. Each one preserves its own moment in internet history, and each one produces a different type of loneliness. What follows is my experience walking through these spaces, what they were, what they became, and what it feels like to stand in a virtual world that used to be alive. Welcome to the strange worlds of dead MMOs. There.com launched in 2003 during a wave of social MMO experimentation. The idea wasn't to create a competitive game. It was to build a social playground, a massive archipelago of islands where players could hang out, customize avatars, ride hoverboards, attend events, explore custom-built zones, and treat the world as a kind of proto-virtual reality space. The game developers often marketed it as the next step in online interaction, an accessible, casual, avatar-driven community. It attracted a dedicated player base, especially during its early years. It even competed with Second Life for a short period before fading into a niche corner of the internet. Despite its decline, a small loyal community kept it alive, keeping the servers running for anyone who still wanted to step back into the early 2000s digital imagination. Logging into There.com felt like stepping into a 2000s version of VR chat without the VR. The world is wide and sunlit, a chain of islands connected by beaches, hills, and artificial plazas. Every location seemed built with one intention: to make social interaction effortless. The design invited players to gather, talk, travel, and share the space. But that's the thing. There weren't any people. The emptiness was immediate. These islands were clearly constructed to be full, and exploring them alone created a strange disconnect. I knew the game once had communities, events, hangouts, and groups, and I've seen evidence that still remains today. But inside the world itself, none of this was visible. I walked from area to area, searching for signs of life, listening for movement, checking for chat messages. I rarely saw anything. There were moments when I thought I found players, but most of these were NPCs left behind, left to tend to players who were not there. The only actual person I met was someone who had created their account the same day I did. They obviously weren't a long-time community member. They were there doing the same thing I was doing, exploring an old MMO out of curiosity. The isolation didn't feel hostile. It felt like a massive liminal space, a world built for connection that had settled into silence. There were peaceful moments, standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean, or walking through a plaza built for crowds that would never return. The world felt like it had come to rest after fulfilling its purpose, but that rest created an eerie stillness. I felt like the only active participant in a world suspended between life and abandonment. There.com was a platform meant for people in the early 2000s, a place to socialize for them. But now that that time has passed and people have moved on, it remains in a lifeless, liminal state. A world that reflects a time period that everyone has since moved on from.
Welcome to Worlds Online.
Worlds.com is one of the earliest 3D social virtual worlds. Launching in 1995, it predates most modern MMOs by years and pioneered concepts that would later become standard. User-created worlds, avatar-based interaction, themed hubs, and customizable spaces. It even partnered with major brands and musicians in the late 90s, becoming a cultural novelty during the early internet boom. Its engine and design reflect a primitive but ambitious era. Low-poly rooms, billboard textures, looping music, and handcrafted spaces. Everything feels like a snapshot of pre-2000 internet culture. For years, a small community kept it alive, frequenting hubs like Ground Zero or Gatekeepers, while fan-made worlds expanded its size. Today, however, the servers have been down for over a year and likely aren't coming back. Worlds.com is effectively gone. However, I do have a personal experience. I recorded my Worlds.com footage more than a year ago, long before the servers went down. Even then, the world felt like it was approaching its final days. The starting rooms had players in them, but none of them moved. It was like walking into a lobby full of statues. Avatars stood completely still while the old looping music echoed through the room. It created this impression that the world was running out of momentum. It all was still technically functioning, but without the life that once filled it. Even when there was what was seemingly an active player base surrounding me, everything felt lifeless. Exploring deeper into the different worlds felt like wandering through a time capsule. Rooms were decorated with late 90s aesthetics, old advertisements, logos, trends, and textures that had not changed in decades. The strange thing about virtual worlds is that they don't age the way real environments do. They stay preserved in whatever state they were left in. Nothing decays, nothing erodes. Nothing adapts to the passage of time. The only thing that changes is the real world around them. That contrast made every space feel uncanny. Worlds full of pop culture references, early internet art, or fan tributes to TV shows existed exactly as they did when they were created. The only difference now was the silence. Some empty rooms felt harmlessly abandoned, but others had this sensation like something was watching. Not because of jump scares or horror tropes, just because of the scale of absence. You stand alone in a world that thousands once traveled through, and the walls still reflect that history. Walking through Worlds.com felt like being out of place and out of time. It was eerie, unsettling, and strangely poetic. And now that the servers are gone, the footage is a record of a world that no one can visit anymore. A world lost to time. Activeworlds launched in 1995, around the same time as Worlds.com. But unlike Worlds, Activeworlds aimed for something even more ambitious. It wasn't just a single world, it was a collection of thousands of worlds, each hosted by users or companies, all accessible through a central hub. People could build entire environments using early 3D assets, creating cities, art projects, fandom spaces, personal archives, and experimental zones. In its prime, Activeworlds represented one of the earliest versions of the metaverse, a multiverse of user-built spaces, a network of virtual micro-worlds, each with its own culture, style, and history. Over time, it faded to a small, dedicated community, but the world stayed online, quiet, intact, and waiting. Activeworlds felt more liminal and isolating than There.com, but in a different way. Its worlds felt like old art exhibitions left behind in a museum no one visits anymore. Unlike There.com's unified island layout, Activeworlds was fragmented. Hundreds of smaller worlds, each with its own atmosphere. I visited worlds dedicated to art. One even recreated the works of Vincent van Gogh in digital form. I saw pop culture spaces devoted to Godzilla, The X-Files, and other pieces of late 90s and early 2000s media. Walking through them felt like reading a scrapbook from a different version of the internet. The time capsule quality was powerful. Every world preserved the exact mood of the era it came from. The skyboxes, textures, fonts, and small decorative choices made everything feel handcrafted. And because these worlds were user-built, they reflected individual imaginations, personal creativity frozen in place. Despite the isolation, this world felt peaceful. Many of the smaller worlds were quiet, like digital gardens that had stopped growing but were still intact. Worlds with nothing in them except skybox art, colors, or experimental shapes. Places that once hosted visitors but now rested in silence. It didn't feel eerie like Worlds.com. It felt pleasant, like these spaces had found closure. In a strange way, Activeworlds felt most alive precisely because of how personal the worlds were. Each one carried the identity of whoever built it, even if that person hasn't logged in for 20 years. Exploring these dead or dying MMOs revealed how digital spaces absorb the intentions of the people who built them. These worlds were created for social connection, for presence, for shared experience. When those communities disappear, the architecture remains. The plazas remain, the homes and hangouts remain. The servers kept running, but the world stands still. There.com felt like a social playground waiting for a crowd that would never arrive. Worlds.com felt like an abandoned time capsule sealed in a moment the early internet stopped resembling itself. Activeworlds felt like a museum of personal creativity, peaceful in its isolation. What surprised me most was how human these empty spaces felt, even in their silence. They hold memory, not my memory, and not the memory of most people watching this, but the memory of a generation that experienced the early internet as a place of discovery. These worlds preserve the era better than any documentary, because they still exist exactly as they were. They're relics of an internet that moved slower, dreamed bigger, and created spaces simply for the novelty of being together. As the modern internet continues to evolve, places like these become rare. They're reminders of how digital worlds age differently, how they linger, how they hollow out, and how they quietly endure. Will I be personally revisiting these worlds? Yeah, I think I will. And I implore any of you out there to do the same. Because to me, personally, I believe that these digital spaces are worth remembering. So, did I miss any? Please leave it in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.